Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for another episode of Off the Iron featuring the Goodwin boys, Adam.
And Evan.
Back at it again with part 2 of our season preview. Hope you enjoyed part 1, which we released this morning. And right now we're going to start recording it on January 12th at 7:36. And we're going to take a look at the rest of the divisions today. But before we get into it, just a quick reminder that Off the Iron is brought to you by Rocky Mountain Barbecue Catering. Come by and pick up a lunch featuring any one of their signature smoked meats, sausages, or burgers with 2 sides and a drink for just $12. Open 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. on weekdays. Go visit them at 5303 68th Avenue, Southeast Calgary. Also, don't forget to follow us on all of our social media platforms, including Facebook and Instagram at Off the Iron Podcast, Twitter at Off the Iron Pod, and our Gmail, offtheironpodcast@gmail.com, as well as our YouTube channel, Off the Iron Podcast. Will pop up. You'll see our ugly mugs on there, and then you can get your fix that way, if you so please.
Our video content's usually a little bit delayed compared to the audio content for the podcast, just because it takes a long time to process. So
yeah,
usually the day after we release the audio podcast, the video will be available on YouTube for you guys to consume. Adam and I are thinking of ideas on how to kind of consolidate all of these social media streams and content and videos into one spot for everybody. So we've got some ideas. We're just gonna work on that throughout the season. So hopefully we will have a fully functioning Off the Iron podcast website by the time this season is over that will amalgamate all the content for you guys and give you one spot to go to interact with us instead of 15 million spots, which it feels like right now.
And it would help me save my breath in that intro. I felt like I was running a marathon there for a second. But as I said, we are doing part 2 of our season preview, and we'll just hop right into it. We did do the North/Canadian division yesterday, and we're going to look at all 3 divisions in the U.S. in part 2 today. Do you want to start with the East Division?
I think we should start with who's this podcast brought to you by.
I already did that.
Oh, did you? Oh, man, I was too busy doing the sound. My apologies.
Yeah.
Extra plug for Rocky Mountain Barbecue. Go check them out. Delicious food. Support your local businesses. There, tied it in, right?
Yeah, there you go. Put a little bow on it.
Which division did you want to start with?
We should start with the East. We were going to do that one yesterday, but we got to talking and didn't quite get to it. So we should start with the East.
I had a total brain fart here. All my notes are based on the old divisions, Atlantic, Central, Metro, and Pacific. I totally forgot they reorged. So you're going to have to cue me up for teams. I know they should. Most of the divisions are pretty much the same, with one except for the 1 or 2 teams that have kind of swapped out based on geography. So
all right,
why don't you go over who's in the East Division this year?
So in the East, we got Boston, we got Buffalo, we got the New Jersey Devils, the New York Rangers, the New York Islanders, the Philadelphia Flyers, and the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Washington Capitals. So to say the least, a stacked division. This should be probably the most hotly contested, maybe outside the North Division up here in Canada, I would say.
Yeah,
lots of top end teams here, and it'll be fun to watch. Hopefully we can get to see as many of these games as possible. Did you want to start it off with Boston and go over some additions and some subtractions? Quite a different look in Boston this year.
Yeah, definitely. I think, Boston's always going to be competitive just with the forward group that they have. But I do think they're going to regress a little bit this year, just from some of the subtractions that they've had. So I'll just go over them. Leaving Boston, of course, the big news maker last week, Zdeno Chara, wanted to sign in Boston, but I don't think they wanted him back and kind of didn't really offer him what he was looking for. So he went to Washington. That's going to be a big hole for Boston to fill on the back end. When you also add in that they lost Torrey Krug as well to St. Louis in free agency. So those are the 2 main pieces, minor pieces. Oddly enough, both coming over to Calgary. Joachim, is it Joachim? Yeah, Joachim.
Nordstrom. Yeah.
Nordstrom. and Alex Petrovic, another blue liner, lost by Boston. They didn't really add anybody. All I have for names is Craig Smith and Greg McKegg added in Boston, and some more significant re-signings. So Jake DeBrusk's name was out there all through free agency and in the trade market. Boston has decided to re-up him for a small contract or a bridge contract of 2 years, $3.675 million. Also re-signed Matt Grzelcyk, 4 years at $3.7 million per. And Carson Kuhlman they signed as well for a 2-year, $750K. I'm not sure if that was an entry-level contract or not. I don't have it in my notes here. But those were some of the significant signings that Boston did in the offseason.
Yeah.
What I wanted to ask you actually was, has there been an update on Rask? Is Rask done? Is his career over? Is he going to be back with Boston? Or
It sounds like he's going to start the season. It's whether he's fully invested. I mean, I guess that's remains to be seen. But it sounds like he's there, and it's going to be Halak and Rask again for the time being. We'll see. I know the relationship between Rask and the fans and maybe even the team was a little shaky there for a bit, but seems like everything is cool on that front. But big losses on the back end, especially with Torrey Krug. He's their leading PowerPoint man, the PP the quarterback on the PP there. So he's going to be a big loss. This does allow Matt Grzelcyk to step up in the lineup. Probably going to step into maybe even a top pairing role, maybe try and fill Torrey Krug's shoes a little bit. The back end is certainly a question mark for me. I mean, we heard all the rumors that Noah Hannafin was being courted by Don Sweeney and
Boston local.
The Bruins management team, and lots of rumor packages there, but looks like they're going to start the season as is with their back end. And the other question mark with Boston is the health of their forwards. Marchand and Pasternak both had off-season surgery, will not be available to start the year. I'm not sure how much longer they have to recover. Initially, I believe it was a 3 or 4 month recovery, and they had it in October or something. So they could miss some significant time, which might allow them to, or it might end up being a little bit lower in the standings than we're used to seeing with Boston. But that's going to be a key. And new captain Patrice Bergeron taking over. You can always rely on him for, number one center, offense, defense, the whole nine. So
one of still the best players in the game right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Always in the Selke conversation and just knows how to win. You know what you're going to get from him every single night. So even more responsibility is going to be heaped on him if Marchand and Pasternak are not around for the first month or so.
Yeah, just taking a look at their forward ranks without the likes of Pasternak and Marchand. And, you have Krejci, you got Bergeron. Both of those guys are usually injured for a good stretch of games in the regular season as well. You got Charlie Coyle, who they traded for in the offseason, or a couple seasons ago now. DeBrusk, but outside of that, it gets pretty thin for Boston. So they might have a challenge in the first couple weeks of the season. They do have Cassie or Andre Cassie, or I can't remember how. Kasha, thank you. I can never pronounce that. God, I'm just as bad as Don Cherry. They got Nick Ritchie, who like him or leave him. But Sean Curley, Chris Wagner, bunch of role depth guys that are going to have to step in to fill the void. Boston over the past years has been pretty good at that, bringing in the right depth guys to fill in the holes as they present themselves. So it wouldn't surprise me if they stay competitive. I don't think they're going to be in top 1, 2, even top 3 spot, but especially in this stacked division. But we'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm. All right. Another key there is if Rask can maintain his form, they should have a good chance of making the playoffs. You never know. If he struggles, then I don't like their chances. But That's all I have to say about the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, they have one of the best 1A, 1B combos, I think. Usually 1A Rask for sure, but recently Halak's been stepping in a lot more for Boston. So I think they're set up in the net. As long as they get decent contributions from both of them, they'll be competitive. Like I said, I don't think they're just with the new look blue line and some of the major room guys leaving in Chara. I don't know. It could be a year of transition for Boston fans.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately. And it won't surprise me if they make a move too.
Who knows? Maybe those Hannafin conversations will reignite and maybe they'll actually come to an agreement of some sort. You never know. I'm not 100% sure I want to move on from Hannafin at this point, but if the package is right, I guess you never know. But we'll see where that goes. Do you want to move on to Buffalo?
Yep.
Buffalo?
We both did it at the same time.
You want to go to Buffalo?
Who wants to go to Buffalo?
Fuck you, man. I still don't know what that clip is from. I hear it on Sportsnet 960 all the time, but I have no idea what it's from.
Me neither, but it's funny.
Okay, Buffalo made a splash, so go ahead and...
Definitely. They got a new look team, that's for sure. So just let me pull up Buffalo's cap friendly here. 2 seconds. There we go. All right. So departing from the Sabres, Marcus Johansson, Johan Larsson, Wayne Simmons, Jimmy Vesey. Is it Vesey or Vesey?
Vesey.
Vesey. And Dominic Cahoon, who went to Edmonton. But they did add quite a few big splashes. Well, maybe not big splashes, but quite a few players in the offseason. Big one, of course, the $8.5 million man in Taylor Hall.
Of course, everyone saw that one coming, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure why he went to Buffalo, but there must have been some reason there. With Hall and potentially Eichel on the top line, that's a pretty deadly top line right there, just with the two of them. So maybe it was a chance to play with high-end talent that kind of sealed the deal for him, but who knows? They also brought in Cody Eakin, stole Tobias Reeder from us for their $700K. I was really hoping the Flames would entertain bringing Reeder back. I thought he was a pretty good fit for the Flames last year. They also signed Brandon Davidson, Matt Irwin, brought in some veteran presence to kind of steer the ship for these young guys, and Eric Stahl, who is still he's not what he used to, but he's still a serviceable player in the NHL for his age. I think he'll bring a lot of leadership to the Sabres this year. They also brought in Riley Sheehan, depth center, third, fourth line center. And I wanted to get your reaction on this. They also signed for goaltending depth Dustin Tokarski.
Oh, Tokarski, what a save by Tokarski.
Brings back World Junior Championship memories when Pierre Maguire pretty much had a stroke when Dustin Tokarski made that giant save in the semifinals there.
The infamous can you believe it goal from Jordan Eberle. Yeah.
So it was I just wanted to get a reaction from that name. Not that that's a major ad in terms of goaltending depth, but it's funny to put him on the list. And then also in terms of signings, they brought back Victor Olofsson, who has emerged as one of their offensive threats over the course of last season. 2 years at $3 million. They also re-signed, I'm not sure if he's their number one or if who's their other goalie? I'm drawing a blank. Carter Hutton is still their number one. It might be a 1A, 1B kind of thing, but they did re-sign Linus Ullmark as well to a $2.6 million contract for 1 year. They brought back Sam Reinhart also on a rather large contract, not in terms of term, but $5.2 million for a single year. I think that's a little bit much for Sam Reinhart personally, but they must see something there in his development. And to round off the signings, they also brought back Casey Middlestat, who's been quite disappointing for his first couple of years in the NHL. He was a highly touted prospect that hasn't quite panned out yet. Doesn't mean he won't, but they brought him back for $875,000 for a single year. Kind of a prove me contract, similar to what the Flames did with Mangiapane.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key with Buffalo is they're going to have to get some contributions from the young players. You brought up Casey Middlestat. He's going to have to start finding a groove here. He looked dynamite in his first partial season. He played like 7 games at the end of a college season or something, I believe, and almost a point a game in that little stretch, but hasn't been able to sort of replicate that success over the course of an 82 game season. So big prove it year for him. Victor Olofsson has to, come back with that offensive flair that he showed last year. And then obviously it's going to go a long way for Buffalo if Taylor Hall and Jack Eichel can mesh, whether they end up on the same line or on separate lines, try to spread out the scoring a little bit. Taylor Hall is going to have to find that MVP form that we were used to him having a couple seasons ago. Also on the back end, perennial green jacket contender, Rasmus Ristolainen.
I knew you were going to bring him up.
He is what he is at this point.
Here.
Yes. Whether he's, capable of it, I'm not quite sure, but the back end, I think the goaltending is solid. It's not special with Hutton and Ullmark. I think quite highly of Ullmark. I think he could be something. But the back end and the goaltending have to be much better than they were last year in order for them to do any damage in this stacked East Division.
Yeah, I agree 100%. For them to go anywhere in this division, being how stacked it's going to be, back end has got to be much better than last year. They were just so leaky last year. They did, they were streaky. They go on a stretch of 10 to 12 games and, win 10 to 11 games in a row. I think, was it last year they went 10-0 or 10-0-1 to start the season or something?
Yeah, they've done that for a couple years straight in a row
now. So they're very streaky, and that just leads to, some holes and leaks in your defensive game when you're that streaky. When you're scoring 4, 5, 6 goals a game, it's pretty easy to go on a run. But when you're letting in 4, 5, 6, turns around in a hurry. Mm-hmm. Outside of Ristolainen, they have the superstar still in Rasmus Dahlin. I expect another year of growth and development there. But outside of that, they got Montour. He's pretty steady. But other than that, their blue line is pretty thin. One thing I did forgot to mention for the Sabres as well, they signed their 2 number 1 draft picks over the last couple of years. Dylan Cousins, who was the captain for Team Canada this past World Juniors, and also Jack Quinn, who was on the World Juniors this year too for Canada as well. 2 really good young players. It looks like they have them slotted in their starting lineup to start the season here. So we'll see what happens, if it's a kind of a 10 game and down or what's going on there. But
yeah, I actually completely forgot about Cousins after that great World Junior where he was one of, if not the best player throughout the whole tournament, kind of in that mix with Trevor Zegras of Anaheim and Zegras, sorry. And then Ville Heinola from Finland. But if he can step in, that's just going to give him a little bit more depth. Whether he'll be able to put up huge amounts of offense, I'm not sure in his first season. But also Jeff Skinner has to have a bounce back year after earning that massive contract. He had a pretty major regression last year. So they're going to have to rely on more than just Eichel and Hall to do some damage here.
Yeah, for sure. One thing oh God, I can't talk today. One other thing we should note is Zygmunt Girgensson, the Latvian superstar, is starting the season on injured reserve as well, so he's unavailable.
So potentially maybe Cousins starts in his spot, maybe in a third line role, something like that, and maybe can work his way up. We'll have to see where that goes. Anything else on the Sabres?
Yeah, I think they're going to be finishing bottom 3 in that division for sure. But it will be a year of growth for a relatively young team. They don't have a lot of old veteran guys outside of Stahl. Most of their core is in like the early 20s to mid 20s. So another step forward, hopefully, from them, and give them another year. I think they could be quite a competitive team if they loop it all together. That's of course depending on what happens with Hall and all that stuff too. So, but yeah, I think that's enough for the Sabres. Let's move on
to the New Jersey Devils, coming off a last place finish in the Metropolitan last year.
The Devils.
The Devils. Me and Evan both big fans of Seinfeld, so for anyone who gets that reference out there, probably one of the best episodes of all time. But you want to do a quick rundown on the Devils offseason?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to be honest. I didn't recognize a lot of these players on the Devils. I did not follow them a lot last year, just with all the struggles they had. The only thing I heard about them was, of course, Mackenzie Blackwood, their goaltender, and I felt really bad for him because he's a great goaltending prospect, and he just got thrown to the Wolves last year.
Yeah,
just because New Jersey was horrible defensively last year. So PK Subban had a massive regression year, so hopefully he can turn that around. And they didn't. They thought that. Well, I'll just go over it. So departing the Devils, we have Kevin Rooney, Mirko Mueller, John Hayden, Frederick Clausen, and Corey Schneider. So they finally got rid of the one of the best goalies in the league but over the past 10 years, and went back with that Luongo Schneider tandem in Vancouver 5-6 years ago. Was one of the best goalies in the league. But as soon as he went to New Jersey, man, did he ever digress and regress?
Yeah, he was dynamite that first year and maybe the second, but then it was a steep fall off for him.
Yeah. So coming in for the Devils, they have Andreas Johnsson, Ryan Murray, Scott Wedgwood, and they thought they had Corey Crawford, but Corey Crawford just announced that he is retiring from the NHL this week. So that's, I'm sure, a blow for the Devils, kind of set their season on fire a little bit. Now they have to go right back to that Blackwood kid, unfortunately, and rely on him. So hopefully they can not shatter his confidence in another season. But also re-signings for the Devils. Sami Vatanen's back for a 1-year, $2 million deal. Jesper Bratt, they brought in for a 2-year deal at 2.75 per. Mackenzie Blackwood, who I've mentioned before, they brought him back for 3 years at 2.8 per. And Riley Merkley, $875,000 contract for 1 year are the notable signings. There was a few other ones that I had never heard of, so I did not report on them.
And one blow to the New Jersey Devils early is going to be Nico Hischier. I think he's starting the season on injured reserve, or his timetable is uncertain. It says he's missing the season opener at least. Whether that turns into something more long-term. I think he had surgery on something in the offseason. But they do add quite a few names up front. Andreas Johnsson in that trade from Toronto. And then on the back end, you mentioned the Ryan Murray trade. That was kind of a head-scratcher. I guess Columbus just trying to clear out some cap space. But, he's a solid. I don't think he's lived up to the billing of a second overall pick, but still a solid top 4 guy. You mentioned bringing Sami Vatanen back down the stretch drive there of the offseason. Just a couple days ago, they brought him back into the fold. So with the Devils, I mean, if a lot of things go right, I think they can be a competitive team, kind of like the Ottawa Senators of the U.S. I kind of view them as. They'll be a thorn in the side of some teams. They're not going to go away easy, but overall, just not enough there, I think, to do any damage. Unless Jack Hughes, puts the team on his back and, shows why he was a first overall pick. I think they're going to struggle a little bit this year.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they're going to be in the bottom with Buffalo, unfortunately. They're in a tough division. They're in the middle of a rebuild. They do have some attractive pieces that they could potentially, if things don't go their way, which we're anticipating they probably won't, that they could potentially pull the trigger on a few deals here. They got a couple guys that would be quite attractive in the trade market coming up here on the last year of their before entering UFA territory. So that'd be Travis Zajac, Kyle Palmieri, who has always seemed to be a target over the last couple of years, and Nikita Gusev, all pretty stellar offensive talent. Now, whether they want to depart with all those guys is a different story, but they're all entering UFA and could fetch a pretty decent prospect pool back probably when it comes down to it. Now, I don't know what trade markets and stuff are going to be this year. It's going to be a weird time for all that stuff with financials and COVID and all that stuff going on, but definitely some trade pieces there. So I do expect New Jersey to make a few moves. Obviously they lost Hall. So over the course of last year, they got a decent haul of pick, no pun intended, haul for haul with picks and stuff coming back the other way. So from Arizona, but I think it's going to continue to be a rebuilding year. I don't see them doing much of anything, especially with the goaltending situation. And just looking at cap friendly here, Corey Schneider, they must have bought him out. I didn't realize they bought him out. I thought his contract was over. He's getting paid for another 4 years, $2 million for doing nothing. Those buyouts, I tell you.
And a random Mike Camilleri buyout still on the books for this year too, 1.67. I can't even remember what that story is, but yeah, probably going to be a tough year. Even on the back end, they'll probably have some interesting assets to dangle at the trade deadline. Ryan Murray, Will Butcher, Sammy Vatanen, Connor Carrick, and Kulikov are all UFA at the end of the year as well. Yeah. So if Murray doesn't really fit in with their future plans, I'm sure that'll fetch a decent return at the deadline.
Yeah, definitely. So hang in there, Devils fans. I got a soft spot in my heart for the Devils, as I alluded to last episode. So huge Broder fan. I've always liked the Devils before and since then too. So hang in there. It might not be your year, but never know. You could string together a run in a short year and make the playoffs. Who knows?
Yeah, crazier things have happened.
All right. Moving on. Who are we going to?
Let's go to the New York Islanders next.
Okay.
This was a bit of a tough offseason for them. Why don't you run down the big additions and losses?
Okay, just pulling it up. Give me 2 seconds. Okay, so of course the big question mark surrounding the Islanders camp was what are they doing with Barzal? So that just got figured out in the last couple days here. But departing from the Long Island is Devin Taves, Christopher Gibson, Thomas Greiss, and Andy Green. Coming in, I have Corey Schneider, actually. So did they
Lou Lamoriello going back to the old Hockey East days back at Boston College.
Austin Zarnik, actually, they brought in as well. That's where he signed. And Ilya Shohorkin, or however you say that.
Sorokin, I think.
Sorokin.
Yeah.
Were the only additions that I have. So notable re-signings. Matt Martin, they re-upped 4 years for $1.5 million. I'm not sure what the term was there, but he's a decent depth guy. He was pretty good for them in the playoffs too. So Matt Barzal, like we all talked about, similar contract to Kachuk's, 3 years, $7 million per bridge deal, and Ryan Pulak, 2 years at $5 million per.
Yeah, and so with New York, obviously coached by Barry Trotz, they're always going to be that stingy defensive team, but I think they're really going to miss Devon Taves. I think he's quietly one of the best young up-and-coming defensemen, and I think he's a top pairing guy in my eyes. He's not flashy, but just incredibly sound in his own end, and gets the rush moving up ice. Not gonna blow you away with points or anything, but just solid all around. So a big loss there.
Hence why the Avs wanted him.
Yeah, exactly, and that does create a spot in the lineup for Noah Dobson. Their top, I think he was a 12th overall pick in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was actually the pick that the Islanders got from the Flames in the Hamonic deal. They picked Noah Dobson, a right-hand shot defenseman. So assuming he's going to step in and maybe take that role that Devon Taves is leaving. And then up front, it's very much outside of Barzal. It's very much a score by committee type of group. You got couple of maybe second-tier guys in Beauvillier and Peugeot. and Eberle, Nelson, and Lee. They're not all top line players, but should have enough depth there, especially with Josh Bailey, to at least put up a few goals this year. But I think the back end is going to be the question mark here with the New York Islanders.
Yeah, I mean, they have some serviceable depth. Oh my God, I cannot talk today. Depth guys. Jeez. Komarov, Cizikas, Matt Martin, as we said before, Del Cole. Lots of third, fourth guys they can slot around all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. And with the system that they play, they're always competitive, the Islanders, especially under Trotz. They play defensive first, and then they do have some offensive talent on the front end to finish those chances when they get them. So I expect more of the same. I think I have them slotted in as a playoff team in this division. So it'll be close, fourth, fifth. They're going to be hovering around there, I think. But one thing I should correct, I had Andy Green as a departure, and it looks like they have re-signed him for a 1 year, $700,000 contract.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, actually, I think that came down late yesterday, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So back at a 2.7
$700K.
Oh, that's weird. On Cap Friendly here for me, it says value 2.7, cap hit 7. Well, maybe it's signing bonuses or something.
And stuff, yeah.
Yeah, or performance bonuses. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's back, and he'll be a good 6-7 guy for them. A little added depth.
I mean, it depends on the goaltending they get too. Varlamov was quite good for them, especially through the playoff run that they had. I mean, they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals last year before they ran out of steam against Tampa Bay, mainly on the horse of their defensive system and their goaltending. It was quite steady. So if they get the goaltending, I could see them cracking the playoffs. Yeah,
and this Ilya Sorokin kid is very highly touted. It's kind of been like who's that prospect in Minnesota? Kirill Kaprizov, I think. That fan base is always wondering, oh, when's he coming over? When's he coming over? It was very much the same case here with Ilya Sorokin. So he's going to have to step into Thomas Grice's shoes and form a tandem with Varlamov. If it is anywhere close to where those two goalies were last year, then they should be right in the mix in this division. Anything else on the Islanders, or should we move on to the other New York team?
Let's move on.
All right. The New York Rangers are the next team we're going to look at. Maybe the quickest rebuild in NHL history. I guess winning the first overall pick would do that for you, hey?
Yeah, they've had a little bit of luck there. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. So noticeable. Oh, I got to stop saying that word. I cannot say that word today. Departures. I'm just going to say Mark Stahl, who they shipped off to Detroit. Where did they ship him? Detroit. Yes, Detroit did them a favor there. Jesper Fast, and of course the biggest departure, their longtime rock in between the pipes, Henrik Lundqvist, is no longer a New York Ranger. And if people haven't heard, he was signed by the Capitals, but unfortunately has ran into a little bit of health trouble, not COVID related, but it was found out that he has a little bit of a heart condition that he had to have open heart surgery on recently. So wishing him all the best. He's was one of my favorite goalies from the modern day. Always stellar. Never really trailed off. Just unfortunately never did crack that Stanley Cup. They were competitive for a good 3-4 year stretch there where they were making deep runs in the playoffs, but never quite made it, unfortunately. But
ran into the red hot LA Kings in the 2014 final and just not quite enough there. The Kings were unstoppable in that run.
Yeah, for sure. So players coming in, of course, their number one pick, Alexis Lafreniere. They also signed Jack Johnson, which at $1.5 million price tag, that's not a bad pickup, even though he was bought out by Pittsburgh, I believe, bought him out.
Yeah.
Also coming in, Colin Blackwell, Kevin Rooney from the Devils, Keith Kincaid, Anthony Boteto, and Johnny Brozinski. Notable re-signings also, they re-upped Brendan Lemieux, 2 years at $1.5 million. Ryan Strome also got a new contract, 2 years at 4.5. Tony DeAngelo was also re-upped for 2 years at 4.8. And Grigoriev, their goaltender, who's going to be filling in or stepping in between the pipes as the number one, they re-upped him for 2 years at 2.4.
Yes, the going back to one of the names you said there, the very controversial Tony DeAngelo, very, very outspoken politically, big Trump guy, but some are drawing some of the ire from some fans around the NHL, but definitely an offensive dynamo on the back end there. Going to be key for them again this year. In goal, I think they're going to be solid, the Rangers. I know losing Lundqvist hurts, but if Shesterkin and Georgiev kind of continue that the steady run of play, I mean, Shesterkin was dominant at certain points in his limited time last year. I think they'll be fine. I like their back end. They did give up quite a few chances last season. That was a bit of a problem, but maybe with another first year for Trouba done and dusted, maybe a second year settles in with the Rangers, and then same with Adam Fox. That one hurts. As a Flames fan, that one really hurts.
Yeah,
he would look good in a Flames uni, but obviously had no interest in playing here. But up front, there's not going to be any issues with the likes of Panarin, Kreider, Zibanejad. Strome had a kind of resurrected his career there, and then obviously stepping in. I think Lafreniere is going to be pretty dominant in my eyes.
Yeah, I agree. They kind of took a step, kind of a building year last year. They were, they made the playoffs, or the new playoff format.
Mm-hmm.
They got walloped the first round by Carolina, but I expect big things from the Rangers this year. I think it's just another year of growth and team chemistry building kind of thing with some of those young guys. And I don't see them regressing at all this year. I don't see the departure of Lundqvist being a huge hole between the pipes as well. They have two capable young goaltenders coming up in the system there to fill the hole there. And their blue line is rounded into form again. Yeah, like you said, it's been one of the quickest rebuilds ever. But that's what happens when you get the number 2 overall pick and then the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah. And speaking of that number 2 pick, Kaapo Kakko has to be better this year. He won't be relied on as heavily, especially with Lafreniere coming in. But he's got to find a little bit more form here. A bit of a rough rookie season for him. Didn't quite live up to expectations last year in many fans' eyes, but I think they'll be dangerous, especially with who I believe should have won the Hart Trophy last year, Artemi Panarin, leading the charge in New York. And just a little side note, it actually came out on Twitter a few weeks ago that apparently when Panarin was deciding on which team to sign with coming over from the KHL, it was down to Chicago and Calgary, and he chose Chicago.
Really?
So just a little salt in the wound for us.
Damn it.
Fans. Man, would he look good in a top 6 with Johnny Gaudreau?
Yeah, no kidding. Well, can't really do much about that.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on the Rangers, or should we move on?
I just a note that I saw. It was either yesterday morning or this morning. Kaapo Kakko's actually been a little bit of trade rumor recently. There's been some talk of Pierre-Luc Dubois for Kaapo Kakko deal.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, similar pedigrees, 2nd and 3rd overall picks, respectively. Man, I mean, it would have to be more than Kakko if I was Columbus. I'm sure it's more than just
that was the main piece that was discussed.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'd be some other compensation there in some form of a pick or a prospect or something. But
yeah, speaking of Columbus, we'll bring that up and with Pierre-Luc Dubois, a little bit of an interesting situation when we move on to the Central. But do you want to move on to the Philadelphia Flyers?
Absolutely. So a quick recap, departures from Philly. Matt Niskanen. I think he actually retired Niskanen, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Bit of a surprise, that one.
Yeah, I think he probably could have played another few years, but just decided to hang it up. All the power to him there. Tyler Pitlick, Nate Thompson, Andy Walensky, and Derek Grant are the notable departures from Philadelphia. Coming in, there's not a lot of signings in Philly. They brought in Eric Gustafsson, solid D-man. Had a little bit of a tenure with the Flames there. Good offensive guy, probably fit right in on their power play.
Mm-hmm.
And Derek Pouliot. Notable.
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
I can say notable re-signings. Philippe Myers, they brought back for 3 years at $2.5 million. In net for purposes of backing up Connor Hott. They re-signed Brian Elliott to a $1.5 million contract just for a year. And good news story to start the NHL season. Oscar Lindblom is back healthy on the Philadelphia roster and with a fresh contract, 3 years at $3 million per.
Yeah, that's good to see that they rewarded him despite his health troubles. Solid young offensive player, kind of in that second, third line role, secondary scoring to complement the likes of Couturier and Giroux and Voracek, all the top guys there. So very much kind of an offseason of continuity. As you said, not too much additions other than Eric Gustafsson. Definitely help out the power play there. But honestly, I think I like the way their roster set up, as long as Cata continues to be very, very impressive as a young goalie, still only 22 years old. Usually the goalies don't break in as early as he has, but I like their forward group. I like their D. I think they're a pretty serious contender this year, coming off a Metropolitan Division win last season.
I agree. Yeah. I think they're going to be quite competitive. I would put them in the cup contender category myself. Just like you said, pretty continuous team from last year to this year. They did go. They made the No, they didn't quite make the Eastern Conference Final, but they won a couple rounds.
They lost in the second round to the Islanders.
Right. Yeah. But that was a little bit of a disappointment, and that's what happens when your goaltending takes a little bit of a turn south in the playoffs. Yeah. And of course, they ran into the Islanders, who were playing unbelievable last year in the playoffs. But I expect another step forward from Carter Hart, and I agree. Their blue line looks pretty solid. Not a lot of superstars, but pretty solid overall. Pretty steady. And up front, they got some of the best offensive talent in the league. And they have a lot of grit and roll guys too that are going to come in handy for a compacted season and a compact playoff schedule too. So I really like the way that Philly's shaped up.
All right, we're on the same page there. Shall we move on to the Pittsburgh Penguins?
Yes. Okay, the Pens. So they had quite a bit of turnover too in the offseason. So leaving the Pittsburgh Penguins, of course, talked about on our previous episode yesterday, Matt Murray, who went to Ottawa. Patrick Hornquist went to Florida. Patrick Marleau went back to the Sharks. Justin Schultz, who I believe signed in Washington. Yes, he did. And Connor Sheary will be missed, definitely. A depth centerman. Was he? Yeah, I think he's a centerman. Mm-hmm. In Pittsburgh. And, of course, Dominique Simone, who was signed by the Flames. Coming in to the fold in Pittsburgh, they have Michael Matheson, Maxime Legacy, Frederick Gaudreau, Evan Rodriguez, Josh Curry. It's quite a long list. Mark Jankowski for the old 1 year, $700,000 contract. Kasperi Kapanen, who they got in a trade with the Leafs, and Cody Ceci.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Just to round it off, the picture for the Pens, notable re-signings. Their goaltender, Tristan Jarry, 3 years at $3.5 million. And I can't remember his first name, but McCann, 2 years at 2.9. The guy that they got from Florida in the previous trade a couple seasons prior.
Yeah, Jared McCann.
I want to say Jake for some reason.
So Same old Jimmy Rutherford up to his old tricks, just constantly bringing guys in and sending guys out. You never a dull offseason with old Jimmy Rutherford there. Kapanen's going to be a huge addition, as we know, back with the team that originally drafted him. He was originally part of the Phil Kessel deal back in the day. I mean, as long as Malkin and Crosby are still elite players, they're going to be competitive. I mean, that goes without saying. Gensel will be back in the lineup after being injured down the stretch drive last year. Obviously, rounding out their top six with Jason Zucker as well. Pretty deadly top six forwards there for the Pittsburgh Penguins. On the back end, I think they've gained a little bit of stability. I know for a few years there it was kind of a revolving door of names, but Chris Letang still a number one defenseman. Pettersson's been really good for them. And John Marino, this guy kind of came out of nowhere, just earned himself a nice little contract extension on the third, 6 years at a $4.4 million AAV. So he stepped in there, kind of gave him a little bit more stability. So I think the biggest question mark with them is, can Jari continue his form from last year? And if he's anywhere close to that, again, they'll challenge for the division title with Crosby and Malkin still going strong.
Yeah, I mean, Rutherford's decision's easy as long as Crosby and Malkin are there. They're going for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Pittsburgh's going to be in a world of hurt when those guys retire, though. It's going to be a pretty long rebuilding process for the Penguins, I think, once it's time to, move on from those two horses that they've ridden for the last 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's the same old story in Pittsburgh. They seem to find these depth guys who come up through their system or through these trades that they make. And they end up being pretty damn good players. Case in point, Jake Gensel and Brian Rust. Those guys have been lights out for them since they've came to prominence underneath Crosby and Malkin there. Teddy Bluger last year. No one's even heard of him before,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden he's lighting up the league. I wouldn't be surprised if Mark Jankowski takes a big step forward as well, given a different role than what he had on the Flames as well, especially because he does have offensive talent. He just never could put it together with Calgary because he wasn't really given the opportunity because he wasn't consistent enough to get the opportunity. So it's a little bit on both sides there. But I expect Pittsburgh to be right in there. I mean, Malkin's health is usually always questionable, especially in the last half of his career here. Yeah. He usually misses some big stretches. They have had quite a lengthy offseason. They got ousted in the first round of the playoffs last year, so they've had lots of time to get healthy and rest up. So I expect them to be challenging for the division title too, as well. Only question mark being in goal, I think, as well. Tristan Jarry, if he is what they think he is, I think they got a diamond in the rough there because no one would have predicted that Tristan Jarry would outplay Matt Murray 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But if he continues and his trajectory and rounds to form again, they could be a contender as well with a healthy Malkin and Crosby. You never know with Pittsburgh.
Yep, they're always in the mix with those two boys. Shall we move on to the Washington Capitals, the reigning division champions, although I guess they weren't the East Division champions last year, but they did win the Metropolitan, and they look poised to be contenders again. You want to run down what they look like this year?
Yeah, so departing from the Caps, of course, the big piece, Braden Holtby, between the pipes, moved on to Vancouver, which we alluded to last episode. Also leaving Ilya Kovalchuk for the sunny skies of KHL. Yeah. Travis Boyd and Radko Gudas on the back end also departed. Coming into the fold, I think a big upgrade on Radko Gudas, although it's different style, different type of game. Justin Schultz, who we alluded to, left the Pens. He was a pretty important piece on their back end that Pittsburgh will definitely miss for sure. Have Henrik Lundqvist here, but we've already alluded to he's actually not going to be. Did he officially retire?
Nope, not as of yet. Not that I've heard.
Okay, so the door is open for a return there still, so that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Trevor Van Riemsdyk's coming to Washington. Daniel Carr, Paul Ledoux. I mean, these are just depth guys. Cameron Schilling, Zachary Fucali, Zdeno Chara being the big splash that just happened, and Connor Sheary coming from Pittsburgh to Washington, rival to rival.
Yeah.
So Sheary's a good depth centerman as well. So notable re-signings for the Capitals as well. Brendan Dillon on the back end, $3.9 million for 4 seasons, the next 4 seasons. So what are your thoughts on the Caps?
I like the way they shape up. Obviously, I can't remember if you did mention it, but also head coach Peter Laviolette, big change behind the bench there, moving on from Todd Reardon. He's one of those guys who's had success wherever he's gone. Took 3 different teams to the Stanley Cup final in Philly, Nashville, and Carolina, winning the cup with them back in 2006. So this is a very much a win now type of team still, with Ovechkin still plugging away. I mean, I expect him to be between 40 and 50 goals again. You can pretty much bet your entire savings on that happening. On the back end, I think they're a little suspect with Carlson, Orlov, Schultz, as we know, is very good offensively. A little bit suspect defensively, but Chara definitely give him a little bit more stability. But the biggest question mark for me is, can Ilya Samsonov be that true number 1 guy? He did outperform Holtby last year by many of the statistical measures, but we've seen guys react differently when all of a sudden all the eggs are in their basket, kind of like a David Riddick situation here in Calgary.
Yeah.
So if he can duplicate his form from last year, once again they'll be division title contenders.
Yeah, agree with everything you said. They're a similar situation to Pittsburgh. They're in win now mode with Ovechkin, Backstrom, Kuznetsov, Oshie, Wilson up front. I mean, that's a pretty solid group of forwards going forward. Lars Eller is there for another three years as well. They got good depth guys. Hathaway, who they stole from the Flames, which I'm still sour over. Richard Panik, Carl Hagelin, and adding Connor Sheary into the fold. A pretty decent forward core. I think their back end is a little bit better than what you gave them credit for. Brendan Dillon is a pretty solid defenseman. I would put him 2-3 on their depth chart. And I think hence why he was rewarded with the contract that he got in the COVID era. Orlov, he's okay. But I do give Schultz a little bit more credit. He's going to be playing in front of or behind a forward group that's a little different style than Pittsburgh, so it'll be interesting to see how that fits. He's definitely going to be him and Carlson on the power play are going to be pretty dynamic if that's the way they go there. But for me, the question mark is in goal for sure. I didn't even know who they got to replace Lundqvist. Well, obviously they brought in Lundqvist hoping he would be 1A, 1B with Samsonov. That obviously didn't happen. So to replace Holtby, I don't know much about this Phoenix Copley.
He's been kind of like a tweener. He's played some NHL minutes, I think, for St. Louis originally. He's 28 years old. Obviously, Samsonov is going to be the number 1, but Copley, I think, can be decent in some spot duty, some cleanup duty. But yeah, overall, like the looks for the Washington Capitals. I think they'll be, as long as Backstrom and Ovechkin don't start to show their age, they are 33 and 35 respectively. If they can at least squeeze one more prime year out of both of those guys, they'll be right in the mix again.
Yep, agreed.
All right.
Moving on.
That is the East Division. Should we do a quick little prediction of what we think the standings are going to shape up here?
Yes. You go first for this one. I'll do the next division.
All right. I believe the Philadelphia Flyers are going to come out on top in this division, followed closely by Washington. I actually think the Rangers are going to finish third, Pittsburgh fourth, Boston fifth, Buffalo sixth. Sorry. The Islanders fifth, Boston sixth, Buffalo seventh, and New Jersey eighth. That's my bold prediction for the season. I believe the Boston Bruins are going to miss the playoffs.
Interesting. To be honest, this division is quite hard to call because there's a lot of teams taking the step forward. I have a slightly different look. I do think the Flyers are going to be top two. So I actually have the Capitals winning this division again. I got the Flyers in the 2 spot. I got the Pens in the 3rd spot. And I do think Boston is going to make the playoffs. I have them in the number 4 spot. So I have Buffalo, the Devils, the Islanders, and the Rangers missing. I think the Islanders and the Rangers are going to be Boston, the Islanders and the Rangers are going to be competing for that 4 spot. I really do think it's going to be right down to the wire between those 3. But I do think Boston's going to end up squeaking it out. So I got the Caps, the Flyers, the Penguins, and the Bruins making it out of that division.
All righty. Let's move on to the Central Division. You want to go there?
Sure. Yep.
All right. Just a quick recap of who is in the new Central Division. It is Carolina, Chicago, Columbus, Dallas, Detroit, Florida, Nashville, and Tampa Bay. So it's a bit of a weird division. It's not really that central with Tampa Bay and Florida being in there. But I guess to keep travel somewhat close together, they decided to put all those big metropolitan areas in one division instead. So a bit of a strange division here, kind of a mixed match of the East and West there. But definitely going to be a competitive division outside of a couple teams that we'll get to here.
Yeah, so I guess we'll start with Carolina.
Okay.
Let me find them in my sheet here. Again, I have the old divisions. They were in the Metro. Yeah, they were okay. So departures from Carolina: Joel Edmondson going to Montreal, Justin Williams, who I think retired, but I'm not sure.
I believe he did.
Yeah, finally hung up the Mr. Overtime. Justin Williams finally hung it up. Great player. Will be missed. Pretty good personality too. Sami Vatanen. They lost. Anton Forsberg and Trevor Van Riemsdyk were the big departures from Carolina. Coming into the fold, they have Jesper Fast, Jeremy Baracco, David Gust, Sheldon Rempel, and Joakim Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
Notable re-signings. They re-signed one of their depth defensemen, Hayden Fleury, 2 years, $1.3 million, and Fogle, 1 year at $2.15.
Fogle.
One
of my all-time favorite movies. Super bad. Little shout out. Sorry to interrupt you. Anything else on signings?
That's all I have.
Okay. So the Hurricanes, I like the way they're shaping up. They obviously didn't make too many additions outside of Jesper Fast, bringing him in from New York. Sort of their major addition, you could say, is still Vinny Trocheck. Came over last year at the deadline. Haven't seen too much of a sample size with him in Carolina's lineup, but Trocheck, I think, is one of those solid underrated guys, probably in the running for one of the best second line centers in the NHL. And then that big horse up top, Sebastian Aho and Andrei Svechnikov. I think they'll be good up front. I like Martin Nikas or Nechash. There's been lots of debate on how you say his name, but
don't ask me.
A highly touted pick as well. Started to come into his own a little bit last year, and then we know they're solid on the back end with Hamilton, and then one of the best pairings in the NHL in Pesce and Slavin. As you said, they brought back Fleury, and they still have got Gardner and Brady Shea. So pretty solid back end there. In net, I think is going to be the big question mark. Again, a lot of these teams, it comes down to goaltending, but Mrazek and Reimer should be at least average, middle of the pack goaltending. I don't think you're going to get anything special from them, but should be good enough with the rest of their roster to be competitive this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're going to be challenging for top 2 spots in this division. This is by far, I think, the weakest division in the NHL, with the exception of a few teams. I don't think we need to spend more time on the Hurricanes. Agree with every single point you made. I mean, it's hard to bet against Aho and some of the offensive talent that they have on the top 2 lines, and one of the best defensive cores in the game right now in Carolina. So, especially with the healthy Dougie Hamilton as well. So, again, question mark in goal, but playing behind that defensive core, it will mask a lot of holes, I think, there. So, yeah, expect them to be a contender coming out of this division. So.
All righty. You want to move on to Chicago? This one will probably be pretty quick from both of us, given the some of the changes they've made. But go ahead and run down what happened with Chicago this offseason.
Okay, notable departures from the Blackhawks: Oli Mata, Brandon Saad, Corey Crawford, Dylan Sakura, Drake Kajula, Slater
Cuckoo.
Sorry?
Cuckoo.
Okay.
That's the defenseman that signed in Edmonton that I was mentioning. Yeah.
Right. And Dennis Gilbert coming into the fold. They signed traded Nikita Zadorov, Matthias Janmark from Dallas coming over, Lucas Wallmark, Pius Suter. I mean, these are all depth guys for the most part. Wyatt Kalinick, never heard of him. Brandon Peary, Anton Lindholm, and Carl Soderberg from Phoenix. They just signed 2 weeks ago or so. Re-signings from the Blackhawks: Dylan Strome got re-upped 2 years at $3 million per. Dominic Kubalik, 2 years at 3.7, and they signed Malcolm Subban, again 2 years at $850K in goal.
So obviously the biggest news of the offseason probably was the health news regarding Jonathan Taves. Not going to be with the team probably the whole year, I'm guessing, until they figure out, what's going on there. Don't want to speculate on that, but going to be a rough year in Chicago, especially in goal. I mean, you went from having arguably one of the best goalies in the NHL in Robin Lehner last year to a tandem of Colin Delia and Malcolm Subban. Think it's going to be a really, really rough year. I wouldn't be surprised if they finish dead last in the NHL.
In the NHL? Wow. Yeah. That's a bold prediction.
Especially without Taves, man.
Yeah, that's true. They do still have DeBrincat. They got Kane. They got Andrew Shaw. They got Kubalik, who took a step forward. They brought in Janmark, who's a pretty talented offensive guy too. But I agree with you. It's going to be a rough year for Chicago fans. Even their D-core is not that great. I mean, outside of Duncan Keith, you got Seabrook, who's definitely showing his age for sure. It looks like he's starting the season actually on IR as well. Outside of that, you got DeHaan, but it gets pretty thin after that. And one other thing that we forget to mention is they're without Kirby Dach as well.
Right. There was another name I was trying to remember, and of course, Kirby Dach.
With his completely blown up wrist at the World Juniors. Have you seen the picture of it? That was like, oh man, that was ugly. But yeah, it's gonna be a rough year for Chicago fans. I don't know if they'll be last place in the NHL, but they are not making the playoffs in this division, unfortunately.
Definitely agree. And one more note from the back end. I'll be interested to see how Adam Boquist continues to develop. Very highly touted, top 10 pick. Just 20 years old. I think he's going to step up, but not really the type of guy to really drag a team to the playoffs. Very, very raw still, but be interested to see how he does this year. But I think that wraps up our outlook on Chicago.
One more thing about Chicago. I actually think that people might be sleeping on one of their goalies too, Delia, or Delia, or however you say his last name. He was quite good last year in stretches for the Blackhawks when Crawford was injured. So Subban stepped in and played quite decent for them too. I think they're going to have a rough year because there's not going to be a lot playing in front of them, I don't think, unfortunately. But I expect Colin Delia will emerge as the number one there. Maybe a little bit more than people give him credit for. So that's just a storyline to watch with Chicago.
Absolutely. I think he is their plan for being the number one. So hopefully for Chicago fans, he lives up to that billing. You want to move on to Columbus?
Columbus, yes. They were in the Metro last year too. Sorry, I'm just playing, bouncing all over the place here. You might hear some mouse clicks and some keyboard typing if you're listening very carefully. Columbus, CBJ. So leaving Columbus, we have Devon Shore. Of course, we talked about at length the big departure of Josh Anderson going to the Canadians and being bet on huge by Bergevin.
Yeah.
Ryan Murray leaving CBJ, and also Marcus Nutabara. I think I pronounced that right, but leaving as well. Coming into the fold, they have Max Domi. In the was that a trade for Anderson, Max Domi?
Yeah.
Okay. I couldn't remember if that was a trade or if that was a signing on both sides. They brought in Mikko Koivu, who I don't even know or didn't even know was still in the league. Cole Sherwood, Mikhail Grigorenko, and Cliff Poo.
Cliff Poo, the all-time name club. So the Columbus Blue Jackets, it's definitely going to be a different look for them this year. A lot of the major pieces are still there, obviously with Dubois for now. Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Notable re-signings. They brought back Michael Del Zotto for $700K. They re-upped Bjorkstrand, who is one of their main offensive guys now, one of their main drivers. 5 years at $5.4 million. Pretty big contract there. Of course, we've already talked about Pierre-Luc Dubois. 2 years at $5 million. Don't expect him to be on Columbus maybe by the end of the season. It sounds like
seems to be a lot of smoke to the fire there.
Yeah, definitely. Gavrikov, they re-upped 3 years at $2.8 million per, and they signed Ryan McInnes too for $700K.
All right. So getting into the Blue Jackets this year, I think a lot of their success this year is going to be how Domi fits in and how that Dubois situation sort of plays out. I like the rest of their forward group. A big fan of Oliver Bjorkstrand and Boone Jenner.
Atkinson too.
Yeah, Atkinson, pretty good secondary guys. Dubois solid. Obviously, we know that they're not they're not the most offensively prolific team. They're more rely on their defense and their goaltending.
They're a system team similar to the Islanders with Tortorella. Yeah,
absolutely. And if they can continue to get that good goaltending from Merzlikins, old Elvis boy there, and Jonas Korpisalo.
Elvis boy.
Elvis boy. He's going to be a character in the NHL for a while. I enjoy listening to his interviews. He's got a bit of Ilya Bryzgalov personality to him.
Yeah.
But I like the back end, obviously, with those two studs, Seth Jones and Zachary Werenski. And then Gavrikov and Savard are solid. And they got some young guys, Gabriel Carlson, Scott Harrington. So I think they'll be fine. Obviously, they're not going to miss Anderson too much with what he contributed last year.
He didn't even play for them. He played 3 games.
But Domi, as long as Domi fits and Dubois, they can sort that situation out, maybe get through the whole year with him. Who knows? They should be fine. They should be right in the mix for a playoff spot. And once they get to the playoffs, they got a pretty good lineup for that. But Columbus will be a tough team to deal with as per usual.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with. I think they've got a pretty well-rounded group of forwards. They don't have any superstars anymore, but they got some real good depth, grit, role guys. Max Domi, I think, might fall into maybe he will be the offensive star there if given the right role and put with the right players. But again, they're a score by committee team, and they're carrying 8 defensemen now and 13 forwards. It just shows they focus on defense first. And they had some success in the playoffs too, doing that as well. And I agree with you. It always seems to hinge on goaltending. If that tandem 1A, 1B, Merzlikins and Korpisalo stay healthy for one, and round to form like everyone expects them to, I expect Columbus to be making the playoffs in this division. So I agree with you. It's going to be an interesting year, but I have them making the playoffs in this division as well.
And just a quick note here, because I just saw that he's starting the year on injured reserve. Gustav Nyquist also still in the fold there. I'm not sure what his injury is, though. I'm just looking it up right now. First up, yeah, he's on injured reserve, so it looks like they're going to be without him for a little bit, but he'll be a boost for them coming off injured reserve midway through the season or whenever that might be. So another offensive piece for them there.
Yeah.
All right. You want to move on to the Dallas Stars?
Stars. All right. Let me find them. Central Division. There we go. Okay. So after making it to the Stanley Cup Finals, not a lot of change for the Dallas Stars. So leaving the Stars, I've already alluded to Matthias Janmark and Corey Perry, who I think Corey Perry they're going to miss a little bit because he was definitely an agitator and a driver in the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely in the playoffs for sure.
Regular season, he didn't really contribute all that much except for a major suspension.
Yeah, gave us one of the all-time gifts.
Yeah,
in meme history, him that long walk to the locker room. Off
the outdoor game. Yeah. So not a lot leaving, although a depth and a heart and soul guy with Perry heading out the door. So could have a little bit of effect on the locker room there. I think the team will be riding high off their Stanley Cup Finals berth, even though they did get walloped pretty hard by Tampa Bay. But coming into the fold, they brought in Mark Pysyk, and that's the only addition that I have listed. They did do a bunch of re-signing in the offseason, though. They brought back re-upped Roope Hintz. 3 years at 3.15 per. They did re-sign Gurianov, who was dynamite in the playoffs, one of the best players on the Stars, especially against the Flames. I thought he was absolutely one of their top offensive threats through the whole series. 2 years, 2.55 per. They re-upped, I'm blanking on the first name, but Fosca.
Radek Fosca.
Yeah. Radek, thank you.
Yeah.
5 years at 3.25 per. He's pretty steady. They did throw another contract to Julius Honka, who 1 year at $700K. Hasn't really panned out. I know he was highly touted coming into the league a couple years ago, but hasn't really cracked the roster consistently there. Maybe they're looking for kind of a prove me contract with him. Of course, the big signing between the pipes, our man Hudobin.
Dobby, as he's referred to.
Yeah, Dobby. I was trying to think of his nickname. 3 years at 3.33, so pretty much $10 million there over 3 years. And Andre Sekera they brought back for 2 years at 1.52. So they're betting on this team to take another step forward and continue the success that they had throughout the playoffs last year. I mean, I don't think anybody had them going to the Stanley Cup Finals out of the West. But they did. They rode a hot goaltender. Dobby played pretty damn good in the playoffs and likely potentially would have won MVP if they did end up winning the cup for them. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Dallas? I anticipate they're going to be quite competitive again.
Dallas, I think they'll be competitive. I think they're going to be one of those teams that if they get in, they're going to always be dangerous in the playoffs because they do play that little bit heavier game. And they're a little bit more suited for that. The big question mark is Tyler Seguin is out recovering from hip surgery. The news came out, had about 4 injuries during the playoffs, which kind of explains his lack of production. But during the regular season last year, still productive, almost a point a game. So depending on how much time he misses, they could find themselves in a bit of a battle to get in. But if they do make it, I do like their goaltending situation still. Ben Bishop, obviously, if he can stay healthy, that's the biggest if for me. But with the couple of studs they have there on the back end, and Klingberg and Heiskanen, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Heiskanen's in the Norris Trophy conversation this year, to be honest. But
Agreed.
I think they're one of those teams that they kind of like the LA Kings of the early 2010s. If they get in, I think they can go far and do damage. But I think it'll be a battle for them to get in for sure.
Yeah, I disagree with you a little bit on that, but that's okay. They're in a weaker division this year.
True.
Yeah, there's no St. Louis, there's no Colorado, there's nothing to battle with there. They're in they got the Florida team, so obviously Tampa Bay is likely going to win this division. But yeah, I think they're going to be 3rd, 4th slotted in. They're going to make the playoffs in this division. I'd be surprised if they didn't. Again, they're probably looking for a little bit of a bounce back year from Seguin. They do have him starting on their roster. He's not on our injured reserve or LTIR, according to the website that I'm looking at.
Oh.
So likely that could be wrong, but it looks like he will be back sooner rather than later. And also, the Stars kind of hinge on Jamie Benn. When he's going, they look like an unstoppable team. When he's not going, usually Sagan's not going, and they don't look very good at all. So I expect them to be quite competitive for sure.
I'm just looking up here on SB Nation. It says number 1 center who steps in for Tyler Seguin. I'm just reading the title here. Will eventually open the 2021 season, and when they do, the club will be missing number 1 center Tyler Seguin. So and that was written January 12th. So earlier today. So I don't know.
Maybe they just haven't put him on IR yet.
Yeah, I guess that is weird that he's showing up there. I expect that to probably change it. But yeah, they don't even have an injury marker next to his name on Cap Friendly. So that's a bit of a strange one. We'll see how much time he actually misses, or if he's in there tomorrow when the season starts.
Yeah, you never know. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to Detroit.
Yes, Detroit. Obviously, well, go ahead and kind of break down their off-season.
Okay, so Detroit notable departures: Jimmy Howard, Trevor Daley, Jonathan Eriksson, Madison Bowie, and Brendan Perlini. Coming into the fold, Vladislav Nemestikov, Thomas Greisch, who's a good pickup between the pipes for them there. Troy Stetcher, who's also a pretty good depth pickup. John Merrill, Bobby Ryan, which is an interesting story. Mark Stahl and Sam Gagne.
Yeah, a bit of a patch job in terms of trying to fill out the NHL roster with some of the names there, but obviously
also resigning in Detroit. Robbie Fabry for 2 years at 2.9, which is a great story. I thought that kid's career was over. He was a highly touted prospect and just ran into 2 major injuries in a row with St. Louis. I'm glad they traded him and gave him the opportunity in Detroit, and he's kind of capitalized on it because he was pretty good for them last year. One of the few little bright spots in Detroit last year. Yeah. They also re-upped Anthony Mantha, who is one of their I wouldn't say star, but one of their top offensive guys. 4 years at $5.7 million. They're obviously expecting big things from him continuing on. And Tyler Bertuzzi, he signed a 1 year, $3.5 million contract for the Red Wings.
All righty. Obviously, there's not a whole lot to say with Detroit here. It's going to be another rough year, especially with how the back end's shaping up. I mean, just to list off the 7 they got on their roster right now, They did just claim Christian Juice off waivers from Anaheim, I believe. But with Mark Stahl, Patrick Nemeth, Troy Stetcher, Juice, John Merrill, Alex Biega, and Philip Hronik as your 7 defensemen, it's going to be another rough year.
Yeah.
In Detroit. I do like the Thomas Greiss signing. Should be a good pair with Jonathan Bernier, but anything higher than I'd say 29th in the NHL would be considered a success for them this season. bit of a harsh look at things, but I don't think I'd be surprising any Detroit fans with that prediction.
Yeah, I mean, Yzerman's just starting to put his fingerprints on this team, so it's going to be a long rebuild for Detroit. But just looking at their draft picks, they do have, let's see here, 6 picks in the top 3 rounds in this upcoming draft. So I anticipate there'll be a few pieces on the move as well from this team once they're not competitive anymore. That will potentially add into that as well. So they have a 2nd round pick from the Oilers, of course, for Anthony Ciu, and from the Rangers. I'm not sure who that was from. Probably the Mark Stahl trade. Yeah. And then they have a 3rd round pick from Vegas as well. So the cupboards will be getting restocked in Detroit. It's just going to take some time.
And they do have one guy in particular who I'm pretty high on and excited to see how he does when he eventually does make the NHL, and that is the German defenseman Moritz Seider. Off to a really good start in the Swedish league this year. He's not going to be playing in the NHL this year, but almost a point a game defenseman in the Swedish Elite League at the tender age of 19. I think he's going to be an absolute stud when he comes over. They did just pick 4th overall with Lucas Raymond. They got Philip Zadina still. He's still establishing himself. And then another top pick, Joe Veleno from the 2018 draft. So they do got some pieces coming, but as we said, it's going to be a rough year.
Yeah, definitely. Okay,
right.
That's enough of the Red Wings. Moving on to Florida.
Yeah,
the Panteros. So leaving the fold from Florida, Josh Brown, Evgeny Dandanov, Martin Pysyk, Dryden Hunt, Lucas Wallmark, Mike Matheson, Dominic Tonato. I'm not sure. I've never even really heard that name before. And recently, Mike Hoffman. Coming into the fold, Carter, I don't even know how to say that last name. Verhaeghe, thank you. Yeah. Radko Gudas, Vinny Hindistroza, who's a good pickup, I think, by them.
Yeah.
Marcus Nutavara, Patrick Hornquist, of course, coming over in the trade for, help me out.
It was just a draft pick going back the other way, I'm pretty sure, to Columbus.
And Anthony Duclair, they just recently signed as well in Florida.
Right. I forgot about that signing, actually.
Re-signing with the team, Samuel Montembeau, or Montembeau, or however Montembeau. 1 year, $700,000. Mackenzie Weegar, who I know a lot of teams were quite interested in the offseason with Weegar. 3 years at $3.25, and Alexander Wenberg, 1 year, $2.25 million.
Yeah, so bit of a strange offseason. They bring in some good guys in Duclair and Hornqvist, but 2 major losses with Dadonov and Hoffman. Hoffman just seems like he's good for 35 goals every season, or right around that 30-goal mark. So we know the Panthers are going to be able to score goals, especially if Hornqvist and Duclair can step into the shoes of Dadonov and Hoffman. Obviously, the biggest question mark with Florida is Sergei Bobrovsky. Obviously had a horrible year, not helped out by that back end in Florida. And actually some interesting news coming out of Florida today. Apparently, Keith Yandle might be a healthy scratch to start the year. Bit of a shocker coming out there.
Really?
Yeah, I heard them talking about it on Spit and Chicklets actually earlier. He's very tight with the boys on Spit and Chicklets. So a little bit of a strange situation. We'll see what happens there. bit surprising because Yandle, he's a solid offensively. You know he's going to put up points. He hasn't slowed down in that area, but obviously a bit of a liability in his own end compared to what he can do at the offensive end. So once again, it's the same question marks for Florida, the back end and in goal. If Bobrovsky can, prove he's worth $10 million, then they'll be competitive. But if he's anywhere near last year, it's going to be a long year in Florida.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a long year. There's already question marks about Bobrovsky. Apparently, he's only participated in one practice so far in training camp. So I don't know if that's COVID related or out of shape related or what that is, but there's already question marks around that. I don't think he'll ever return to that form. He wrote his ticket. He got his, whatever it was, 7-year or 6-year, $10 million contract. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of incentive for him to continue on at that high pace, right? So
yeah,
I think there's a reason he signed in Florida. He kind of just wanted to fade away into the sunset a little bit. But you never know. He could turn it around. That's definitely the biggest question mark with Florida. And then, of course, I did hear that about Keith Yandle as well, that potentially he might be on his way out there, or definitely not as big a role as what he's used to playing there, to make room for some of those younger guys on the blue line. The blue line's okay. I mean, it's not anything to write home about, but definitely there'll be some chances getting through into that goaltender. Mm-hmm. The biggest thing with Florida for me is you can't replace Hoffman's production with a guy like Anthony Duclair or mm-hmm. Vinny Hinostroza. You're not going to get the same production from those two guys as you would have from Dadonov and Hoffman. I mean, that's a major downgrade on the forward ranks for them. They could prove me wrong. I'd be surprised, but I don't think it's going to be a very good year for Florida either.
Just more of the same for Florida.
Yeah.
They've only made the playoffs once, I think, in the last since they won since they were in the Cup final, I believe. But yeah, another long year in Florida. But probably the good news for Florida fans is that you actually get to watch your team in the building this year. They're allowing, I think, like 20% capacity, so a normal size crowd for them in Florida.
I didn't hear that. Really?
Yeah, Florida seems to be the state that is always the first to allow fans back in. They just had about 15,000 fans at the National College Football Championship last night between Alabama and Ohio State.
Look out COVID in Alabama. Did you see all the celebrations?
Yeah, a little. I mean, for some people, it doesn't even exist down there. So, bit of a head scratcher there. But yeah, I think it's going to be a rough season for Florida. Are you ready to move on from the Panteros to the Nashville Predators?
Yeah, I'm just looking for the Preds. I know I have them in here. There they are. Okay, so leaving the Nashville Predators, Craig Smith, Nick Bonino, and Austin Watson are the major departures. A couple good depth guys for the Preds out the door coming in. Help me out. That Polish name that I couldn't pronounce.
Mark Borowiecki.
Borowiecki, thank you.
Yeah.
Matt Benning from the Oilers, Nick Cousins, Brad Richardson, Tyler Luton, and Eric Holla coming in the fold for the Preds. Some notable re-signings after Mikhail Granlund's name being floated about in free agency. The Preds decided late to re-sign him for a 1-year, $3.75 million contract. I suspect if things don't go the Preds' way, he'll be on the move somewhere. And they also re-signed Luke Kunin, 2 years, $2.3 million.
Yeah, Kunin coming over in that trade with Minnesota. Good young player. Minnesota. Good young player there. I think the Predators are going to be kind of a tough team to sort of gauge this year. Obviously had a bit of a downfall last year after being one of the top teams in the NHL for the previous 2 or 3 years. It just seems like that that Matt Duchene curse again. I'm not too sure about the core of this team with Johansson and Duchene, kind of two guys that throughout their whole career have sort of been questioned in terms of their attitude / commitment. I believe Johansson, that's sort of the reason why he was traded out of Columbus. So I'm not too sold on the Predators this year. I mean, obviously I love some of their players and Philip Forsberg and Victor Arvidsson. And then on the back end, still a really good, solid group. I think Dante Fabro can continue to grow and step into a bigger role. Ellis and
Benning's good
Yossi
pickup for them too.
Sorry?
Benning's a good depth defenseman add there too.
Yeah, he should be solid on the third pair there. They're actually shaping up pretty nice with this defense core here. But biggest question marks again for me, can Rinne maintain a little bit of form? He seemed to fall off a little bit last year. UC Saros seems like he may not be as good as they thought he was. They obviously took Askarov in the last draft with the 11th overall pick, I believe, and he's going to be a stud. So the goaltending is the biggest question mark for me. Can Rinne and Saros get back to an elite level? If they can, I think they can do some damage, but overall, I'm not 100% sold on this Nashville team.
Yeah, no, I couldn't have summed up better myself. I didn't know where to put them in this division. Being in a weaker division, I think they're going to be middle of the road, middle of the pack. I think they will be challenging for that fourth playoff spot in this division. I agree. They don't really have an identity anymore. I mean, they used to be a powerhouse, especially, defensive first with Rinne and the blue lines they've had in the past. I mean, they still have their three horses with Yossi, Ellis, and Ekholm, but and the bottom half of that defensive core has rounded out quite nicely as well. But I agree. You don't really know what to expect of them. I don't anticipate them to do much. I actually anticipate them to regress a little bit this year. Just because of those question marks, exactly what you said, the Matt Duchene curse. That guy cannot, I don't know if it's him or what's going on there, but he's definitely had a bad luck through a string of teams recently. I think that's all we need to talk about for the Preds. I don't have them making the playoffs actually in my prediction, so it might be a little bit of a rough year.
All righty, so we'll move on to the powerhouse that we expect to be in this division, the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot has changed for Tampa Bay. There's a few shuffles that happened, and I'm just trying to bring it up here. Atlantic, there we go, Tampa Bay. So out the door were Cedric Paquette and Braden Coburn. Coming into the fold just recently with their trade with Ottawa, who I think Ottawa actually let them off the hook and actually did them a huge favor here. Yeah. Andreas Nielsen, so the goaltender from Ottawa last year, and then taking on Marian Gabourt's contract. I don't think he'll ever play again. It was just kind of a money move there. Yeah. I'm assuming for LTIR credits, so they can start to squeeze some money back in under the salary cap. But notable re-signings in Tampa Bay. So Anthony Cirelli, one of their major cogs in that Stanley Cup winning team, they re-upped him for 3 years at $4.8 million. They also re-signed Eric Cernak for 3 years at $2.95. They signed Jan Ruta, 2 years, $1.3. And then, of course, the other piece they had to lock up, which was Sergachev, Mikhail Sergachev, 3 years, $4.8 million. And also Patty Maroon, big rig, getting re-upped again in Tampa Bay for a 2-year, $900,000 contract. Probably will be the last time that he signs a contract in the NHL, but good on him. It's turned into quite a decent depth guy, role character guy, and has a little bit of hardware to show for it now. 2 Stanley Cups in a row.
Yeah, going for the three-peat there.
Yeah, no kidding.
So some big news with the Tampa Bay Lightning that came out around Christmas time. They actually are going to be without Nikita Kucherov the entire regular season.
I did not hear that.
but they are getting Steven Stamkos back into the fold. So if he stays healthy for at least the regular season, we know they'll still be good. with the likes of Braden Point, Palat, Cirelli, Killorn, all those guys, Victor Hedman, probably the best defenseman in the NHL, but in my eyes, but and then Vasilevsky, one of, if not the best goaltender in the NHL. So I think they'll be okay, despite missing Kucherov. Obviously, he will be missed. Maybe they won't be as dominant as we're used to seeing them in the past 2 seasons, but once again, they will be a powerhouse and a Stanley Cup contender
in a weaker division too. So
definitely, no Boston, no Toronto to deal with. So it'll be another successful season for the Tampa Bay Lightning in my books.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. They're going to be getting 10 games against Chicago. They're going to get 10 games against Detroit, 10 games against Florida. So there you go.
All right. That was short and sweet. Should we move on to our predictions for the division?
Absolutely. So I said I would go first on this one, and I was making the list as we were going through here. I just have to find what tab it's on. There it is. Okay, so I have 4 teams making the playoffs, obviously, in this division. Can't sneak in that 5th.
Yeah.
I think Tampa Bay is still going to win this division. It's hard to bet against them. So I have Tampa Bay finishing number 1. I think the Carolina Hurricanes are going to finish 2nd in this division, just with the way that they're shaping up. They didn't really regress at all. Again, the defensive core, I think they're going to be good. I got Dallas finishing 3rd. And I have the Columbus Blue Jackets sneaking into 4th.
All right. So that means you have Nashville, Florida, Detroit, and Chicago missing the playoffs. Not really surprised with a few of those choices. Mine's going to look a little bit different. So I got Tampa Bay finishing 1st, Carolina 2nd. So we're on the same page there. I actually think Columbus is going to finish 3rd. And this is sort of my, I guess, kind of bold prediction, but Dallas is struggling a bit with COVID right now. Who knows what effect that could have on their season? They're not going to be starting the season the same time as every other team. Maybe that sort of upsets their trajectory a little bit. I think Nashville is going to slip into that 4th spot, and I think Dallas is going to slightly miss the playoffs. That's my bold take.
Take. For the hear it first.
Discover Central Division.
Stanley Cup Finals to not making the playoffs. I could see it happening. I was torn between, CBJ, Dallas, Nashville. They're all kind of like an equal tier there. It was hard to pick 2 teams out of those 3. I just think that I'm not expecting big things from Nashville this year. But they could prove me wrong. They could win the division very easily if they string it together. So, so there you go. There's our predictions for the Discover. It's so weird saying Discover and Scotiabank Central Division, the Scotia North Division, I should say. Sorry. So I think that leaves the last division that we have to discuss, and that is the Honda West Division.
Yes.
Different look here. Of course, the 3 Canadian teams are no longer part of this West Division, so this is mainly the California teams and the Central Western U.S. teams. So do you want to run down who's actually in the division?
Yes, we have the Anaheim Ducks, the Los Angeles Kings, the Colorado Avalanche, the Arizona Coyotes, the Minnesota Wild. So again, weird why they're quite far west of these or east of these teams, but they're there nonetheless. San Jose Sharks, St. Louis Blues, and the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, definitely. I think another one of those divisions that's a little weaker, and it's just the state of some of the teams, especially in California, that are currently rebuilding. So there's going to be a lot of tough years, I think, for some of those teams. But let's start with the Anaheim Ducks.
Alrighty, let's look at their additions and losses real quick. What do you got there?
So leaving the Ducks this year, we got Gabranson, Kevin Boyle, Kyle Cruzculo, I've never even heard of him, and Matt Irwin. Coming in, their big signing was Kevin Shattenkirk, which I don't really know is that big a deal.
Yeah.
Also coming in, Andy Walensky, Derek Grant, Vinny Lettieri, and Maxime Goulard. Re-signing with the team, Anthony Stolarz, 2 years at $925,000. They actually re-signed Ryan Miller for a 1-year, $1 million contract, which I'm a little puzzled about. Maybe just for some goaltending depth. Larson as well on the back end, 2 years at $1.2 million, and then Sonny Milano, 2 years at $1.7 million on the back end as well. So, what are your thoughts on the Ducks?
Obviously, I think the Ducks are in for another poor season. Can't see them making the playoffs here.
Bum, 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 bum.
I mean, they'll go as far as pretty much John Gibson and Fowler and Lindholm will take them. Getzlaf, we know, has been so good for so long, but he's hitting the last year of his deal. He's 35. Outside of that, there's not a ton of offensive depth on this team in terms of top end talent. We still got some sort of second tier guys with Henrique, Silverberg. Obviously, Ricard Raquel is probably their best forward nowadays. But just not enough quality of talent here throughout the forward ranks, especially to be a threat to make the playoffs, in my opinion. Got some good guys coming, as we mentioned, with Trevor Zegras, going to be a stud. We saw he was probably the best player throughout the whole World Juniors that just concluded. So I'm sure he'll step in once he finishes his little quarantine coming back from the World Juniors. But whether he's good enough to drag them to the playoffs, probably not.
Yeah, they also still have $6.625 million on the books from Corey Perry too. So that's the last year that it's that large. It jumps down to $2 million after that from that buyout. So I'm sure they're planning for the next couple of years in Anaheim. I agree, they do have some talent coming up through the fold. Mainly Zegras. If he continues on the same pace, I could not believe how talented that kid is. Watching him in the World Juniors, he's going to be a talent. So look forward to that, Anaheim fans. You'll definitely be rebuilding around that kid. But outside of that, I mean, when your top offensive guys are going to be Raquel and Silverberg, you're going to be in for a rough year. Unfortunately, those guys, they're good players. They're good second, third line players, in my opinion. They just don't have that elite offensive talent that they had for years in Anaheim. So. And being a Calgary Flames fan, I fucking hate Anaheim. So
good riddance.
Good riddance. Enjoy the bottom for a little bit.
They do have a couple other good guys coming. Maxime Comtois, and of course, also played very well for Canada at the World Juniors here, Jamie Drysdale, who they just picked 6th overall. That's the name I was trying
to think of.
Yeah,
was Drysdale.
So whether those guys step in right away or if they go back to junior, it's to be determined still. But definitely some good pieces going forward. But definitely a rebuilding year for Anaheim, to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. All right, moving on
to the Arizona Coyotes.
It's going to be a rough year for Arizona too. Yeah. Just with the financial problems they're having. I've heard they were having trouble even paying their bills. So it's going to be an interesting year in Arizona. But in terms of personnel leaving out the door last year were Taylor Hall. I hate to see that after all that Phoenix gave up for Taylor Hall, that he's just walking away. But they took their shot. Didn't work out. Mikhail Grabner is also leaving. Brad Richardson, Carl Soderberg, who I think they're going to miss quite heavily, and Vinny Hinostroza. I can't believe they didn't try and qualify him or re-sign him or what happened there, but they're going to miss his depth scoring going out the door as well. Coming into the fold in Phoenix, they have Johan Larsson, Dryden Hunt, John Hayden, Tyler Pitlick, Derek Brassard, who they just signed last week, and Drake Kajula. So not a lot coming in to stock the cupboard in Arizona as well.
Yeah.
Notable re-signings last year or over the past offseason, Christian Fisher, 2 years, $1 million. That's all I got for the Coyotes.
Yeah, and I think I think it's going to be a rough year, as you mentioned. There was lots of talk surrounding Oliver Ekman-Larsson this offseason. Lots of teams wondering about him. Actually, Vancouver, Calgary, and Boston, where I think the three teams kind of most heavily linked with him. But, it's a team that struggled so much to score last year, which is part of the reason why they decided to bring in Taylor Hall. But not having him now, Phil Kessel's another year older. Clayton Keller, when he first signed that contract, I thought he was going to be a stud, number one first-line player. He's sort of regressed over the past year, and we'll see what he can do this year. He's going to have to carry a lot of the load there offensively. Whether he's up for the challenge, who knows? But outside of that, Connor Garland is a good player. Sort of started to show his worth last season, but don't think there's enough offensive depth here. And then on the back end, it's just okay. With Hjalmarsson another year older, Goligoski another year older. They're both into their mid-30s now. I think Arizona's in for another rough year, unfortunately.
Yeah, they're only going to go as far as their goaltending can take them. If Kemper has another year and stays healthy like he had, they'll be competitive, but they're going to struggle to score, especially against teams like Vegas and the likes of St. Louis and Colorado being in this division now. It's going to not be good for Arizona.
Yeah, especially with those three powerhouses in the division. They're going to have to play them either 9 or 10 times, as we know. They're going to have to beat up on Anaheim, LA, and San Jose to even have a chance at getting past either Minnesota, San Jose, whoever you think is getting in the 4th spot. But another rough year coming for Arizona fans.
Yep, I think that's enough time on the Coyotes. Let's move on down the list to the Avs.
Yes, the powerhouse Colorado Avalanche. Go ahead with they've had quite a busy offseason.
They have, yeah. Just let me bring it up. Here we go. Okay, so departing the Avs from last year, Nemestikov. I can't remember where he signed, but he went out the door.
Detroit.
Yeah, we've already talked about him. I knew this episode. Matt Nietos on his left. Colin Wilson, a couple good depth guys there out the door, and Kevin Connaughton. Coming into the fold, Brandon Saad, great pickup, great depth guy. Dennis Gilbert, Mika Salamaki, Kiefer Sherwood, Michael Vicanoni, or I'm not quite sure how to say that name, never heard of him before. Kyle Burrows, and of course the big one, Devin Taves. Is it Devin or Devon?
I believe it's pronounced Devon, but I've heard both. But yeah, I like what Joe Sakic's done here. To turn Zadorov into Saad, I think was kind of a steal for them.
Yeah, I agree.
I think Zadorov's an okay defenseman, a second pairing at best, at the absolute best, and to turn him into a very good sort of middle six second liner winger like Saad is, he'll bring it in the playoffs. And then they also got Bowen Byram coming in here. He was fantastic for Canada at the World Juniors, 4th overall pick in 2019, thanks to Ottawa. Going to be a stud alongside Cale Makar, Taves, Gerard, Ryan Graves. Eric Johnson still. This team's deep. This team's good.
Don't forget Ian Cole, who's pretty damn good defenseman too. You don't even talk about him.
Really, the only question mark is, again, in goal. I think Grubauer is good enough when he's healthy, but hasn't been able to stay healthy through the last couple playoff runs and has sort of been the downfall there. But we'll see if he can stay healthy. He's the biggest X factor for them for me.
Yeah, I actually forgot to talk about the re-signings for the Avs. So staying on the team, being re-upped, Tyson Jost, $874,000 for a year. That's a steal of a deal for Colorado at that price. Ryan Graves on the blue line, 3 years, 3.16. Nichushkin, who blossomed into a pretty damn good depth third line player for them as well last year, 2 years at 2.5 per. And one of the best moves in recent memory in the off seasons that I remember, bringing in Andre Burakovsky, who's worked out very well for them. They re-signed him for 2 years at $4.9 million, and they still have $1.8 million in cap space to play with too, thanks to the sweetheart deal of Nathan MacKinnon, only on an annual ticket of $6.3 million for the next 3 seasons. So,
just one more note on the Avalanche here that I want to get in. Obviously, we know how deep their forward ranks are. This is their window. Obviously, is nowhere near closed after this year, but this is sort of their all-in year to try and get this one cup this year, because Landeskog and Saad are both pending UFAs. So I'm not sure, of Landeskog's future. Obviously, they have to keep a boatload of cap space for Nathan MacKinnon when he comes up in a couple of years. But with those two guys sort of up in the air, this will be their best chance to win the cup this year. They're still going to be competitive and a contender in years to come, but this is probably their absolute best chance to take a run at it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's an interesting situation in Colorado because Nathan MacKinnon has come out and said that he would gladly give up, some of that big money to be competitive and have a chance at Stanley Cups year after year after year. Mm-hmm. And I did hear that Landeskog wants to stay in Colorado. So if you got 2 good players motivated like that, they might be willing to compromise on salary. I mean, McKinnon's proven it already, signing that deal. Although he was kind of the first to kind of bridge, like to get to that point in his career of that new gap or the new talent group there. Kind of set the market a little bit as opposed to being, middle or end of the market like Marner and those guys. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it's win now mode for Colorado. It doesn't necessarily mean that the window's closed. It might be a quick retool year and they're right back into a window, coming up here. They do have some decisions to make going forward. You're right. They do have quite a few U of A's coming up for sure. But man, they're stacked. The only question mark that I can see is the goaltending. And if Grubauer puts together a pretty decent year, I'm hot take. Colorado's my team for the cup this year. I think they're going all the way.
I would be hard pressed to disagree with you there.
I've been big up on the Avs for the last few years, and they've disappointed a little bit. But man, that's hard to bet against them, especially being in a weaker division too. Yes,
definitely. All right. Shall we move on to the Los Angeles Kings? Looks like they're next up here. Do you want to run down what they got going in the offseason here?
Yeah, sure. Again, another rough year for Kings fans, but they're in the middle of a rebuild. They got a very good prospect and talent pool coming up here. So it's not going to be too much pain for the Kings very much longer here. But leaving, a lot of these guys, I don't really know who they are, but Paul Ledoux, Ben Hutton, of course, I recognize being an ex-Vancouver Canuck, Trevor Lewis, Joakim Ryan, Tim Schaller, and Sheldon Rempel, all leaving the Kings. Coming into the fold, of course, their big second overall pick, Quinton Byfield, fresh off his World Junior Championship appearance. For Team Canada, they're also bringing in Oli Mata, Mark Alt, Troy Grosnick, Elias Anderson, and Andreas Athanasiou they brought in free agency. Also re-upping with the Kings, Sean Walker, 4 years at $2.65 million, and Austin Wagner, 3 years at $1.13.
Yes, so it's going to be another year of just trying to develop their younger players. Not really looking for them to compete for a playoff spot. But I'm not 100% sure if Byfield's going to start the season there. He might get his 9-game tryout. It looks like he might get a few games and then go back to junior. Obviously, that whole situation with COVID and the junior leagues is still a little bit up in the air, being that he plays in the OHL, which Ontario is one of the hardest hit areas in Canada. But yeah, just another year of development. I do like their prospects going forward. in net, they got Cal Peterson. I think he's going to be a good goalie for years to come. And then with those three big prospects in Byfield, Alex Turcotte, and Thomas Bjornfot, who we saw at the World Juniors for Sweden, things are looking up, but gonna be a rough year in LA.
Yeah, just looking at their blue line, it ain't good.
No.
There's going to be a lot of developing players there. For a team that still struggles to score, I think they're going to be in a world of hurt, especially with those three powerhouses coming in. It's going to be a rough year for LA fans.
All right. I think that's pretty much all we have to say about the LA Kings.
Yeah, I mean, even their forward core is aging too. Like Kopitar is another year older. Brown's another year older. Jeff Carter's another year older. And then it kind of falls off after that. So they're rebuilding, plain and simple. Those guys had a lot of miles, won a lot of cups for the Kings. They were a powerhouse for 4 or 5 years there. So can't be a powerhouse all the time. There's this thing come and goes in cycles. So yeah, I think enjoy the basement, LA.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we got the Minnesota Wild. Let's hear what you have for them for their offseason additions and subtractions.
So, I mean, the biggest thing in Minnesota, in my opinion, is the shuffle at the GM position that happened mid-season last year, bringing in I can't remember the guy's name that's going out the door, but Bill Guerin coming in.
Paul Fenton was the guy leaving.
Paul Fenton, yeah. So that I think it'll be a little bit before he turns Minnesota around, but I think they're headed in the right direction. Departing the Wild, we have Eric Stahl, Devin Dubnyk. They finally moved on from Luke Kunin, Mikko Koivu, Alex Galchenyuk, and JT Brown. Coming into the fold, they have Cam Talbot, which is a good pickup at a decent price for them, I think, to replace Devin Dubnyk. Dubnyk was kind of on the decline a little bit from his MVP form of a couple years ago, or near MVP form. Nick Bonino, Nick Bjugstad, Marcus Johansson, and the Hamburglar coming into to Minnesota there for a little goaltending depth. So a couple good depth guys that they brought into the fold there in Minnesota. Also re-upping with the Wild, the major signing, of course, Jonas Brodin, 7 years at $6 million per season. Cam Soucy, 3 years at $2.75 million. And Jordan Greenway, who I was really impressed with last year. Every time I watched them that they played the Flames, he was a force, Greenway. I mean, Minnesota took it to us a few times last year, so they re-upped him for 2 years at $2.1 million.
Yes, and the biggest perhaps addition for them this year, Kirill Kaprizov. The hype is real with him. If you're not aware, spent the last 3 seasons in the KHL. Is a bit of a late round pick. I think he was picked in the 5th round. If I look, round 5, but been one of the best players in the KHL. 62 points in 57 games last season, 33 goals. Just a dynamic offensive talent. So I think he'll step in right away and prove that he can be a high-end player in the NHL. Also, their top pick from this season or this past draft, Marco Rossi. Whether or not he gets into the lineup, he's a stud too. Surprised he fell all the way to, I think it was 9th or 10th he was picked. But a little bit of again, it comes down to the goaltending, the question mark there. Stalock and Talbot, not the best tandem. Obviously Talbot's solid, and Stalock has been, pretty average in terms of what he's been given them the past couple seasons in a tandem with Dubnyk. But I think they're definitely not an elite team, especially with the aging Parise and Ryan Suter. But I think they're good enough to squeak in past the California teams and Arizona. But that's what I'm thinking on the Wild. What do you think?
I agree with you. I think they're going to be challenging for that 4th playoff spot in this division. I like Minnesota, actually. They've a lot of their aging guys have gone away. They got rid of Stahl. They got rid of Koivu, who was their captain for a long time there. I shouldn't say got rid of. They just decided not to re-sign him. They're going to be another one of those score by committee teams. They don't have an outstanding offensive superstar yet, but I'm assuming one of these guys might emerge as that. They got Ryan Hartman, who seems to be a pretty good guy. Johansson's usually pretty decent if he's healthy. Nick Bonino is always good. Kevin Fiala was a pretty good offensive guy for them last year too. They got Foligno, so they got some talent up front. It's just a matter of can they put it all together. I don't think goaltending is going to be as big an issue for them. Cam Talbot has proven he's still a quite capable goaltender, and he's playing behind a pretty good defensive core right now.
Yes.
He's got Spurgeon, Ryan Suter, Dumba, Brodin, and Soucy. That's pretty damn good. I mean, that's got to be up there for top 5, top 6, top 7 blue lines in the league, in my opinion. But they're going to struggle to score a little bit, I think. So, middle of the road in the division is what I'm anticipating with them. I wouldn't be surprised if they make the playoffs, and I wouldn't be surprised if they miss too. So, but they're trending in the right direction. They're doing what they have to do now. They gotta move on, bring some young talent in, and they're in the process of doing that.
It's just unfortunate that they're going to be cap space is going to be hard to come by for them, I think, for a while. With those Ryan Suter and Parise deals. Still productive players right now, but at a combined almost or over 15 million for at least 5 more seasons. It's
I got Zuccarello for $6 million too for the next 4 seasons as well. So
it's going to be tough to navigate around that, but I think they can remain competitive, especially if Kaprizov and Rossi be the players who I think they can be.
Yeah, definitely.
Alrighty,
that's enough of the Wild.
To the San Jose Sharks, who were dealt a bit of a blow yesterday. The news coming out that Evander Kane, a little rough situation there, declaring bankruptcy, and it looks like he's not going to be playing this season, from what I've heard.
Man.
But yeah, I don't want to dive into that too much, but go ahead and sort of recap their offseason.
Okay, offseason for the Sharks. Obviously saying goodbye to their cornerstone franchise guy, Joe Thornton, for the past 10, 12 seasons. As we all know, it's been highly publicized, at least in Canada. He's the savior for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So, also heading out the door, Johnny Brodzinski, Brandon Davidson, their pretty stellar backup goaltender, Aaron Dell, Tim Heed, and Mekler Carlson. Coming into the fold, Devin Dubnyk, Patrick Marleau again for another stint with the San Jose Sharks, Ryan Donato, who's a decently talented young guy. He hasn't really panned out to the hype, and also Matt Nieto, who's a good third, fourth line depth guy. Re-upping with the Sharks, Kevin LeBlanc finally gets paid after taking a very team-friendly deal last year for $1 million, or just over $1 million. He signs a pretty decent ticket, 4 years at $725 million. That's all I have for signings for San Jose.
Yeah, I think especially with that news coming out that Evander Kane, whether he plays even part of the year, gonna be a rough year in San Jose, I believe. I mean, Erik Karlsson, when he's healthy, we know he's a good defenseman, but
which he is this year, I've heard.
Yes, he seems to be sort of kind of regressing as the years go on, but can still, he's on that big ticket now, $11.5 million a season. Whether he's worth it at this stage in his career remains to be seen. But Brent Burns and Marc-Edouard Vlasic starting to age a little bit, 35 and 33 respectively. But if Martin Jones plays like he did last year, going to be a long year in San Jose, I think, especially without the likes of Evander Kane up front. Definitely think they're going to be a lot closer to LA and Anaheim rather than be in the mix for a playoff spot.
Yeah, I mean, that's unfortunate news about Evander Kane for sure. Without him in the offensive group there, outside of Couture, Meyer, and Hurdle, and LeBlanc, there's not a lot there. So it's a big blow to their depth for sure. And on the blue line, Burns is another year older. He's 35 years old. Carlson, can he regain his form? I'm probably going to bet on no. Seems to be a little bit of a Band-Aid now. And Vlasic, pretty steady still, but he's also 33 years old. You're going to see some aggression in his game too. Kind of a similar story to Giordano, kind of a similar sort of contract arc there with Giordano, not making as much as Vlasic, but similar age range when they sign their bigger contracts going into when they're probably going to end up retiring. But there's going to be a lot of holes in San Jose, and I don't think they have the goaltending to fill them, just based on track record of the last few years. Martin Jones can be a stud, but he can also be horrible. And recently, it's been pointing towards horrible. So, and I don't think Devin Dubnyk's going to be that guy either. He's on his tail end of his career as well. I still have them middle of the pack in this division, but it's middle of the pack. Let me rephrase that. They're top of the crap in this division, if I can say it like that. I do
cream of the crap.
Yeah, cream of the crap. There we go. That's what I was trying to think of. They're going to be better than Anaheim. I think they're going to be better than LA. I think they're going to be better than Arizona. But that's it. They're going to be fifth place in this division, I'm pretty sure.
All righty, so that wraps up our look at San Jose. Shall we move on to the last two teams in this division, the two powerhouses in St. Louis and Vegas? Let's start with St. Louis.
St. Louis, expecting some pretty big things from St. Louis this year. I think, especially with this reshuffle into a little bit weaker division than they're used to, they're going to be quite competitive. They're going to make the playoffs for sure. So they did have some notable departures from the Blues, of course. Alex Pietrangelo, their captain, and their best defenseman being the big piece that moved on. They're going to have to play him in this division 10 times, which is interesting. Interesting storyline there. They finally moved on from Jake Allen as well. Jay Boatmeister officially announced he's retired due to the heart issue that he suffered in last year's season or playoffs. I can't remember when it was, but he's no longer in the flow. But Troy Brouwer leaving the St. Louis Blues. I don't see him landing anywhere, so his NHL days might be over as well. Mike Vicone, Andreas Borgman, and Derek Pouliot all leaving the Blues, so some depth leaving there as well. Coming into the fold for St. Louis, Torrey Krug, of course, the big signing to replace Pietrangelo, or at least add back to that defensive depth that they were developing there. They also signed some grit with Kyle Clifford, Steven Santini, John Gillies signed in St. Louis or into their system, so you might be able to call that goaltending depth. I'm not quite sure, not sold on that. Curtis McKenzie, Sam Anas, and of course the most recent development, Mike Hoffman signing I'm not sure if he actually signed or if he's still on a PTO with St. Louis.
Yeah, it's been announced now. It's a 1 year, $4 million deal.
1 year, $4 million. That's pretty good sneaky pickup for St. Louis right there.
Yeah,
that's a good 30 goals right there usually. So,
and I'm sure Hoffman's a little bummed with the way the situation has turned out. 1 year, $4 million is still a good payday, but I'm sure he was looking to cash in this past offseason. But obviously a huge loss in Pietrangelo, but I think they did replace him admirably with Krug. I don't think Krug is at the level of a Pietrangelo. I think Pietrangelo is a number one guy, and Krug's probably a number two at best. That one still just doesn't make sense to me. Why they would bring in Justin Falk and give him the long-term deal instead of Pietrangelo. I know cap reasons and all that, but you just gave $4 million to Mike Hoffman. You think you'd be able to find the space for Pietrangelo, but I guess we'll see. Their decor is still going to be solid with Parayko, Scandella, and Vince Dunn. Again, the question is going to be the goaltending, because the forward group pretty much the same except for the addition of Hoffman. So they're going to be have more firepower than normal. But Ken Binnington, we saw him struggle a little bit last season, eventually lost his starting position to Allen in the playoffs against Vancouver there. So once again, it comes down to goaltending.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's can Binnington regain his form? I think he can. I think he was struggling from a little bit of playoff fatigue from the season before. They played a lot of hockey, played a lot of high caliber hockey too for St. Louis on their run when they won the cup, of course. You got to remember they were the worst team in the NHL till December, and then all of a sudden it turned around. So it's a lot of hockey in a short period of time. So that's no longer the case with the big breaks that they've had. They were ousted by Vancouver in the first round of the playoffs too. And with the state of this division, I expect them to be top three.
Yeah, they'll definitely still make the playoffs and be competitive or be a contender. Just that's gonna sting playing against Pietrangelo 9 or 10 times. I'm sure St. Louis fans aren't too crazy about that, but good team, definitely good enough to be at least top 3, could be top 2. We'll have to see. But any last thoughts, or you want to move on to Vegas?
No, I think we can move on. I'm anticipating just the same from St. Louis, kind of a similar season, similar. I mean, their style of play isn't going to change because they brought in more grit players too. They're one of the deepest forward groups in the NHL, with Robert Thomas and Barbashev and Sundqvist and Perron, the guys you don't talk about outside of O'Reilly, Shen, Schwartz, Bozak, those guys who were played quite, and Hoffman now. I think they're going to be top 3.
Alrighty, let's move on to Vegas. Bit of a not controversial offseason, but some people love what they're doing, some people hate what they're doing. Seems they haven't been very loyal to guys they brought in. Max Pacioretty's name was on the trade block apparently, but why don't you run down what's happened in Vegas this offseason?
Yeah, so notable departures, of course, Nate Schmidt. He was the casualty to bring in Pietrangelo. I know that was a very unpopular position from what I've heard from the locker room, letting Nate Schmidt go like that for a 3rd-round pick. I think it was just they needed to get rid of them because Pietrangelo was knocking on the door. Great pickup by Vancouver for that 3rd-round pick for Nate Schmidt is a hell of a deal. Also leaving the group, Nick Cousins and Paul Stastny, who I think they're going to miss in the forward ranks in Vegas, going on to Winnipeg. Of course, talking about the additions, we've already talked about Pietrangelo. Also coming into the fold, Dylan Sekera, Danny O'Regan, Thomas Yurko, and Thomas Nosek for some depth up front scoring. Notable re-signings, of course, the one of the best goalies out there in recent memory, Robin Lehner, signing a 5-year, $5 million deal. Also trying to fight Jake Paul, or not the YouTube guy. What's the YouTube guy that just had the boxing match that was talking a whole bunch of smack to Conor McGregor?
Jake Paul.
Jake Paul, yeah. Leonard wants to fight him too, so
I don't know if everyone wants a piece of him.
Yeah. Guy's built quite the name for himself. And Chandler Stevenson coming into the fold, 4 years, $2.75 million, re-signed with the Knights. So
I think the key with the Knights here, we know that the roster's solid. Obviously bringing in Pietrangelo and Theodore, that's probably the new best pairing in the NHL if they end up playing together. But Martinez is still there. I like that Zach Whitecloud, actually, that big right-handed defenseman.
Yeah, he's been good.
Showed pretty well in the playoffs. So we know they're going to be an absolute force. Alex Tuck up front, Mark Stone. But the biggest question mark for me is the chemistry going to be right? Because we know that there was a little bit of unrest with guys that were on the block, off the block, guys leaving, guys weren't too happy with some of the decisions. But we know they're going to be good. And then another thing with the coaching change last year, that didn't go down too popular, I don't think, as well. But I'm sure they're probably past that at this point. But so the biggest question mark is going to be whether the chemistry is right throughout the whole season. But we know that they're probably going to win this division or be 1-2 with Colorado at least. But that's the only question mark that I have. But what do you think of Vegas?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think one thing that we haven't talked about is there's also some tensions with who's going to be the number one goalie. Fleury's still in the fold there. I have a feeling with the new contract, it's going to be Leonard. Track record proves in the playoffs it was Leonard as well. But that's going to be a distraction because Fleury has that agent that nobody likes, Alan Walsh, and he's not afraid to start poking the organization and stuff like that. I do think that Fleury is probably going to be on the move this year, if not at the end of this year. I could see him potentially being a target for the Avalanche, although I don't know if they'll do that deal now that they're in the same division.
Yeah. It's going to be tough to make the money there work.
Yeah,
he's still owed $7 million. So, but yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying there.
But yeah, that's going to be more of the same from Vegas. I mean, their forward group is stacked. They got depth. They can match in waves. I think they're going to be top 2 in this division as well. And hard pressed to come up with a better blue line right now in the NHL than what you said with Theodore and Pietrangelo potentially being your top pair. That is just crazy in my mind. Deadly, yeah. And then your second pair being McNabb and Martinez. That's pretty good too. And then you got Holden, who we haven't talked about yet either, who's now on the third pair, who's a pretty decent defenseman too. So, and White Cloud as well, like you said. But yeah, no, more of the same from Vegas. They're gonna make the playoffs. They might go deep in the playoffs. They have all the pieces. That just can they put it all together?
All righty, so let's wrap this up with some division predictions. I think we can probably map this one out pretty easily. You want me to start?
Yeah, go for it.
All righty, I am gonna go Colorado number 1. Vegas number 2, St. Louis 3, Minnesota 4th, and then I'll say San Jose is locked into 5th, and then take your pick with the last 3. They're all interchangeable past Minnesota at number 4. But yeah,
I have the exact same positions in this division too. I got the Avs finishing 1st. I do think it's going to be close between the Avs and the Knights for the top spot in this division. It might only be a couple points separating them. But Vegas finishing 2nd in my book, St. Louis 3rd, and I was torn Minnesota or San Jose, and then I didn't realize that Evander Kane was potentially not playing the season, so that was solidified my decision. I think Minnie's going to squeak into the playoffs because of that. And who knows? Could be a dark horse in the playoffs. You never know.
All righty. So that wraps up our look at the rest of the NHL in part 2 here. Bit of a longer episode, this one.
Yeah, no kidding.
But they'll be a little bit shorter going forward. Just with the way the season has started here, we wanted to get a 2-part season preview in. I think we're going to shoot for the 45 minutes to an hour for episodes going forward, but let's get it going. The puck drops tomorrow.
I'm excited. Definitely excited.
Face Off 2021, as I'm seeing on this ad right here. Hockey's back, good times, and looking forward to it.
Good couple of weeks in sports coming up here. You got NFL playoffs and the NHL kicking off. Couldn't ask for anything better than that. And if you're an NBA fan, I'm not huge on NBA, but it's going in full swing in the regular season now too. So good times.
Good times indeed.
Like always, anyone struggling out there with the whole COVID-19 thing, keep your head up, stay positive, lights around the corner. Hopefully we get back to some normal life here pretty quick. I don't think it's going to be too quick, but hopefully by mid-year we'll be getting back to normal, or whatever this new normal is going to be. So keep your head up.
Exactly.
Appreciate the listens. Do you want to run down our socials and tell them who this podcast is brought to you by? And we'll get out of here.
Once again, Off the Iron is brought to you by Rocky Mountain Barbecue Catering. Visit their website at www.rockymountainbarbecue.ca to order your lunch online or request a quote for your event in the future. Drop by the store for a lunch combo with 2 sides and a drink for just $12. Open 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. on weekdays. Go visit them at 5303 68th Avenue, Southeast Calgary. Also, don't forget to follow us on our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Just type in Off the Iron Podcast will be the first result. On Twitter at Off the Iron Pod, and our Gmail, offtheironpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, thanks for listening, everyone. And we will sign off, and we'll see you next time on Off the Iron.
Yeah, with that, we'll cue the music.